allow me, I'd like to make a comment about abuse of universal jurisdiction. That's what he called it. And maybe because I'm a person who eats a lot of freshwater fish, I am very particular on nomenclature, on how you call things. So when somebody says abuse of universal jurisdiction, what does that mean? Does it mean we're going after a guy who didn't do it? The more accurate thing I should think to say would be selective application of the principles of universal jurisdiction or selective application of the principles of international criminal justice. Because I think the problem many of us had was not that those who are in The Hague should not have been in The Hague. I think the issue was more people should have been in The Hague. So I think that if we're clear on that, then the issue would be if anybody does crimes or orchestrates crime of this gravity, even if he or she were my brother or sister, they should pay for it. Mass atrocity crimes are not like robbing a bank, you know, or, you know, crashing a car or stealing somebody's cow. That is bad, yes. But by the time you conceptualize in your mind that you want to murder human beings on an industrial scale, and you begin taking practical steps towards it, like buying 10,000 machetes or something, or going on the radio and using that language that makes people wake up and kill their neighbors, then I think anything that's done to you should not be called abuse. But in terms of the question also that the comrade was asking, Kaajal, actually there's a whole of a lot of policy dialogue around this so-called selective abuse. This is what led to the AU-EU dialogue on universal jurisdiction, which was a very principled and a very respectful dialogue that was carried out at the level of political leadership, but also at the level of technical officers and at the level of experts. And they produced a shared report known as the AU-EU expert report on application of the principles of universal jurisdiction. And one of the things that the report recommended, especially the 3 African panelists on the report, was serious upgrading of legal frameworks around universal jurisdiction on the continent of Africa. And the AU summit adopted that. So the official policy of the AU is, please, can all its member states upgrade their legal frameworks and be able to robustly try investigate and prosecute universal jurisdiction. Thereafter, actually, they sanctioned a process which led to the development of an AU modern law on universal jurisdiction, which was similarly endorsed by the Council of Ministers and by the heads of state. By the way, that AU-EU expert report is, among other things, the one that recommended what we now call the Malabo Protocol of the court. It didn't come from discussions of the AU. It came from this report where it said, look here, each of us should strengthen our national legal regimes. But should we be unable or unwilling, or we choose to pool our sovereignty? So for instance, one set of criminals have committed crimes against Kenya, but also against Uganda, but also against Tanzania. These 3 states can each individually investigate or prosecute, or they can decide to pool this together and have one investigation and one prosecution. And those are the kind of things that went into the Malabo Protocol. So enough with the rant. For Chris Kiyaseh, I think thank you very much for practicalizing for us how some of these things are not as complex as we would fear, especially if we work in partnerships with those who have invested in knowing that corner of the work like we have invested in knowing ours. I'll reach out to you immediately. Last year, on behalf of South Sudanese colleagues, we filed a case at the East African Court of Justice against the government of South Sudan. And what it had done is that silently and secretly, on the sidelines of COP26, the Salva Kiir and his minions had signed an agreement with some Emirati companies close to the royal family, where they have literally sold off all known oil reserves that exist in South Sudan at the moment. Everything that we know of that's in the ground. They went and took a huge 13.2 billion euro loan, the first quarter of which has been disbursed, and just mortgaged and said, you'll get this from all the oil. So without any care, leave alone of future generations, even of existing persons, one gang one cabal around a president has taken all your wealth. And we really, of course, we are challenging it, and we are saying that even that which has been disbursed is odious debt. But we really would like to get to know each and every single person who was involved in one way or the other, and we call them out in the course of the case. So a case doesn't have necessarily to be called transitional justice to improve transitional justice. We have another whole series of cases we're also doing against South Sudan, where the South Sudanese authorities, in collusion with the Kenyan authorities, had been illegally abducting South Sudanese activists and renditioning them across the border into Juba. And some of them were killed while in jail, just arbitrary arrest and arbitrary detention, no being taken to court, nothing. A lot of this, the person who is organizing it is the worst person in South Sudan, General Kol Korkuch, who has been head of national intelligence for the last several years. He is, I think, more brutal, worse than even Salva Kiir himself. So through these cases, we kept on, even though it's a simple government-to-government issue, and you'd be suing the government through the AG, we kept on calling him out and kept on looking for evidence that would tie him, because it's part of the transitional justice, part of the right to truth, part of the right to satisfaction that the South Sudanese need in terms of the list of the people, mostly men, who have been responsible for their trauma and their tragedy over the last 10 years. And also to Mikel, I agree. The Luo have, Mikel and Tina, the Luo have a saying, chaka chaka. The English saying that the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step is actually a very meek attempt at translation of chaka chaka. Just start. So for me, my urge to my colleagues is, let's just start. One small case at a time. We agreed yesterday we don't necessarily have to go for the people at the top. We will get to them. They will not get free. We will get to them. But really, we can start one little thing at a time. We now know that there's this huge illegal party being thrown for RSF in town by our president. That's a good basis to just pick one or two or three of those individuals, and we begin building a case. If you think we need to sign a small MOU where we list the objectives and we list the principles, the ethics, and so on, that can be drafted and we sign. And when other people come to join, they sign. So we know we're working with the same values and the same principles. If we need kind of case development meetings, litigation surgeries to build our evidence, to build our arguments, that can be done. Quite a bit of that now can be done using secure tech. But we can also meet on the sidelines of bigger meetings. Like, for instance, when we go for the sessions of the Banjul Commission, quite apart from the main opening and the ceremonials and meeting the commissioners, we've learned to arrive 2 or 3 days earlier, and then we lock ourselves, sometimes even in a different hotel, and work on a case or work on a thing. So we know that we'll have colleagues from all over Africa. So if you're going to need colleagues from South Africa, we know they'll be there. If you're going to need colleagues from Equatorial Guinea, know they'll be there. If you're going to need our international friends, many of them come. So we usually find that it's a very cheap way of many people self-funding or of distributing funding and being able to get people in a room working practically intensely 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. So I think things like this exist where we can help each other, and we begin feeling that we're moving. Sorry, that took longer than I thought it would.